Today we're deconstructing one of the funniest sketches of all time, and that is a fact. Key and Peele's substitute teacher sketch. Hi, I'm Linda and I'm your comedy coach. Let's get right to it by identifying and deconstructing the 5 parts of a sketch. So first we have the setup. This is a character sketch. I talk about the different types of sketches in my Intro to Comedy online class. You can go to the link in the description box to learn more. But a really efficient way for a character to not only introduce themselves and the scenario, but to also set up the game, is to literally introduce themselves and to introduce their character game. For example, we might take a sketch like Fire Marshal Bill from In Living Color. Fire Marshal Bill always introduces himself to a group of people who he deems in need of learning about fire safety, and he'll say, "Let me show you something." And usually when he shows you something, he burns the building down, or there's some sort of explosion, something that goes against his principles of fire safety. His introduction also introduces us to the game of the sketch. So in the substitute teacher sketch, Mr. Garvey introduces himself and he says that he's been a substitute teacher for 20 years in the inner city, so don't mess with him. Now, something else that happens visually that helps set up the sketch, and this is something you can really take advantage of when you're filming a sketch and you have the added addition of camera work. The camera pans over the classroom full of students as he's introducing himself, and we quickly see that he is not in the inner city. He's in the opposite. He's clearly in a white-centric suburban classroom in a school that has no lack of resources. This is effective because it visually helps set up the game, but it also does so in a manner that's very quick so that the audience is on board for what's to come next. Because we are clearly seeing the juxtaposition of what Mr. Garvey is saying he's used to and where he's presently at, which is clearly not the inner city. He begins to call roll and he calls his first student, Jay Quellen. And now we're off to the races in terms of playing the game. Confusion sets in the classroom, and then a student tentatively raises her hand and she's like, "Do you mean Jacqueline?" And she very gently corrects him, and this sets him off. Now we're into the meat and potatoes of the game, which is driven by Mr. Garvey's reaction to the students. And what is his reaction? He says, "Oh, okay, so y'all want to play. So that's how it's going to be," something to that effect. In his eyes, the students are doing the thing that he said not to do with him. They are messing with him. And this gets us to the game of the sketch and the game of this character, which is overreacting to benignancy. As I've said before, game is just a pattern. Simply put, it's just a pattern. However, in a sketch like this, that could be performed on stage in front of a live audience or in front of a studio audience, game is a pattern of unusual behavior that heightens. So the unusual behavior is Mr. Garvey's reaction, rather his overreacting to what is like nothing at all. These students are not messing with him. And we're going to see this heightened to an extreme. It's easy to think that the game of this sketch is mispronouncing students' names. And yeah, that's part of it. You could say that's a sub game, but that's not what this sketch is about, because as we'll see when we get to part 2 of this sketch, which they actually did film, it's not about mispronouncing the students' names anymore. It's about misinterpreting their intentions. And again, it's overreacting to benignancy. In the second part, basically all the kids say that they have to go step out of class to take club photos because they're all in different clubs in school, and he thinks they're talking about the club that they're trying to get out of school. They're trying to cut class to go to the club. That's clearly not the case here though, but we'll get to that. As we establish the game, we also establish what the conflict of the sketch is, and every sketch should have a conflict. A conflict doesn't have to be something dire. In fact, the less severe the conflict is, the funnier it can be. So in this sketch, the conflict is Mr. Garvey mispronouncing the names and being gently corrected. That's the conflict here, is that they're correcting him and he thinks they're messing with him. As roll call continues, we keep playing that same game. We mispronounce the name, we're gently corrected, and we overreact a little bit more and more each time. And this leads to an even more explosive reaction. First, he breaks the clipboard over his knee, and then he sends Aaron to O'Shag Hennessy's office, which also gives us another opportunity to pepper in the joke of mispronouncing what are also very stereotypical Caucasian names. That's also peppered into the game, and that's something that Key and Peele did so well. They teetered that line of racial comedy without punching down, because they could come from both sides from a place of truth, being that both of them are biracial. The final part of this sketch is the button, which is one last joke that subverts the game in an unexpected way. And I just love how they decided to end this sketch by mispronouncing a student's name correctly for once, because he calls out Timothy and Timothy pops out in back, present. And then finally we see Mr. Garvey happy. Thank you, because finally a student decided to take him seriously, or so it seems in his eyes. So that was Deconstructing Key and Peele's substitute teacher sketch. Now, we are going to practice this same game, but I encourage you to think beyond the sketch. You don't necessarily have to place this specific character, Mr. Garvey, in another sketch to practice the game. We can play it a different way. If we summed up the game the way I did, as overreacting to benignancy, maybe we can find another situation where a character is overreacting to something that doesn't need to be overreacted to. Maybe a character is taking care of babies and misinterprets their actions as somehow being hostile. Although I feel like that's actually a meme. Oh, there is that one clip, I don't know where it's from, where a guy's like, yo, what's up with your baby? And they're like, he's just a baby. He's just making a face. If you wanted to, let's create another scenario for Mr. Garvey. It's good practice. Maybe Mr. Garvey is getting interviewed for this substitute teaching job, and his answers are good answers, but they're being misinterpreted. Or maybe he thinks that his interviewers are misinterpreting what he has to say. Again, we're looking for that classic Three's Company misunderstanding that drives the plot of the whole show, because misunderstandings are funny when it turns out that's all they were, a misunderstanding. What I'd like for you to do in the comments of this video is pitch me either your version of the sketch that doesn't include Mr. Garvey but includes the same game, or maybe it is about Mr. Garvey. Just pitch me your ideas in the comments. I'd love hearing them, because you guys have some really creative ideas, which I hope you're actually writing. Or if you don't want to put them in the comments because you're afraid of someone stealing them, make sure you actually write the sketch and produce it then. I've gotten some messages from people being like, why do you encourage us to share our ideas so that people can steal them? Well, you're not sharing any ideas, so no one's stealing them. And I guarantee, even if you put an idea out there, the actual execution of that idea cannot be copied until you decide to do it yourself. Okay? So don't be afraid. Pitch me your ideas in the comments. I'd love to hear them. If you have any questions or comments, ask me in the comments. You can also DM me on TikTok and check out my online class, and let me know which sketch you would like me to deconstruct in the next video, and I will do so. Okay, my dog needs to go for a walk, so I gotta go, guys. See you in the next video.